So tonight, give me your best. Let's go. So it's going to be hard to top last night. Charles Alexander, the legend, joining the channel. But I am so pumped up for later at 6:30. I found a film expert, a guy who is rising in the NFL draft media space. He said that he would have taken Garrett Nussmeier over every single player in last year's NFL draft. That's how good he thinks Garrett Nussmeier is. Now, why do I find this to be fascinating? Because look, there are plenty of LSU fans that could sit here and say the same thing. But this is a neutral observer. This is not a film analyst from Louisiana. And what's really fascinating to me is this guy covers the Tennessee Titans. And whether or not people want to believe this, players read everything. I couldn't imagine Cam Ward reading that a rising Titans analyst would say, I would have taken Garrett Nussmeier over you if he would have come out. So we'll talk to this draft analyst a little bit later. Now, I have said this plenty of times as a pretty prominent driver of the Garrett Nussmeier bus experience. Call me the Nuss Hound, if you will. He made the smartest decision of his career by not entering the NFL draft this year. And the second smartest decision he made, obviously, was redshirting that meaningless bowl game. And I hate calling bowl games meaningless, but that one in particular was meaningless. The truth, though, is I would not have done that. That's why I found that to be so interesting, because I am a big Garrett Nussmeier believer. But to quarterback an NFL team next year, I would have probably still selected Cam Ward. If I was the Titans GM, putting all of my Garrett Nussmeier bias aside, I probably would have taken Cam Ward just because he has more experience. And I think experience really matters as a rookie quarterback in the NFL. But what I would tell you is Garrett Nussmeier's upside is through the roof. It is through the freaking roof. And one thing that him and Cam Ward do a really good job is anticipate. Their anticipation skills are through the roof. So it's going to be a fun conversation. And one extra little nugget is that he also would take Cade Klubnik over Cam Ward. So that is what we are going to evaluate tonight. And you're going to love him. His name is Drew Beatty. It's going to be great. Or it's Beatty. I probably should have checked beforehand. But I wanted to share this because everybody's coming out now of all times with their own quarterback rankings. And it's fascinating to me that I still see very prominent analysts and people make the same mistake. They put the young, unproven quarterbacks over the veterans. And that is not what you should do. So I want to share with you this. And look, you guys know, especially since this guy just got married, I've never met him before, but I am a fan of Josh Pate, okay? And truth be told, he has never claimed to be master evaluator of talent. He's just good at covering college football. But I do respect his ball knowledge. And he released his SEC quarterback list, and this is one of the few that I've seen that does not have Garrett Nussmeier in his top 3. He has Garrett Nussmeier number 4 overall. But I want you to see who he has in front of Garrett Nussmeier. DJ Lagway, Arch Manning, and Lenoris Sellers. Now, what I'm about to say could get misconstrued, and that's perfectly fine. Notice also who he has at number 6, Austin Simmons. at number 6 overall in the SEC. That's the highest I have seen Austin Simmons. What does DJ Lagway, Arch Manning, and Austin Simmons all have in common? They have never been, for a full season, a full-time starter. Now, Lagway played a lot last year. Arch Manning didn't play as much as Lagway, but he still played a lot. And Austin Simmons had that one great drive versus Georgia. But quarterbacking in the SEC is an old man's game. Quarterbacking in college football is an old man's game. The best quarterback in the SEC is Garrett Nussmeier. Why? Well, it's experience. I would either pick Garrett Nussmeier or Lenore Sellers as the best quarterback in the SEC. Now, this is the one thing that I feel we are being somewhat, I guess you could say, blind, is when you look at DJ Lagway, who's his offensive coordinator. Well, I think most would say Billy Napier in the SEC is a middle-tier play caller. Definitely not top 5. You want to put him at number 7 or 8? I can hear that out. But Arch Manning, elite play caller. But I want you to notice how many of these great quarterbacks aren't with who we would consider to be the better play callers in the SEC. Oklahoma's got a new play caller. Lenore Sellers has a new play caller. So lots of moving parts. Normally, I'm not too worried for a quarterback if they have a bunch of new receivers coming in. You can replace receiver production. But it's really hard to replace a good coordinator or just start new with a good coordinator. It's really, really, really hard. So, the one thing about Garrett Nussmeier is, yes, he lost Kyron Lacy. Yes, he lost 4 of his offensive linemen. But he produced at the level he produced last year with a first-year Power 4 play caller who wasn't great. Joe Sloan just was not great. Love the guy personally. Never met him personally, but based on everything that I hear, tireless recruiter, dude works his ass off. About what you would expect from a first-year young play caller, okay? And young offensive play callers in the SEC have bad years, all right? So, quick story. The best, most surprising play caller from the year before last was a guy by the name of Wes Moore, who was at Missouri. And obviously, we saw what they did with Cody Schrader and Luther Burden. They were the story of the SEC. They were that middle-tier team that just rose to prominence. What happened this past year? Well, every neutral NFL evaluator would say, what the hell was Missouri doing offensively last year? They did not use Luther Burden the way that most people would use Luther Burden. So young play callers, in particular, struggle. So what if the opposite is true with Joe Sloan? What if the opposite actually happens this next year, where Joe Sloan takes a major step forward in the right direction and he finds his groove as a play caller? You add Alex Atkins, who brings in the Mike Norvell brain power. What if we do see better play calling next year? So the thing that I really found to be interesting with Garrett is so much of what we did offensively was him. It really was him. So much of it. Now, Will Campbell had a phenomenal year. Mason Taylor had a phenomenal year. But if you were to ask everyone outside of Aaron Anderson, everyone else on the offense for LSU last year performed just below or way below expectations than what we were expecting. For some reason, one of the most talented offensive linemen I have ever evaluated in high school, Emory Jones, after a really good year 2, had a tough year 3. Now, he had some great games. He also had some rough ones. LSU could not run the football. LSU had a lot of penalties. And I understand Garrett gets the turnover tag quite a bit, and rightfully so. Texas A&M game is mostly on him. But how many times did he magically pull us out of really difficult situations? And, I go back and forth with other LSU YouTubers, and I'll go back and forth tonight. I got to go on Blake's show tonight. But I do this on Twitter, everywhere else. Now you can find me. Done it in the Discord as well. I will defend Garrett Nussmeier's turnovers tooth and nail, really outside of a few. All right, the Ole Miss picks both were preventable. We still found a way to win the game. Then, of course, the pick versus South Carolina in the red zone was really bad. And then, of course, the A&M picks, in particular the 3rd and 2, rolling out to the left. Bad, bad, bad. But for a first-year starter, the fact that a quarterback like him was the best quarterback on 3rd and 7 or longer really shows you something. And that is with him not scrambling for first downs when the opportunities presented themselves. And I'll be honest, it really infuriated me. When he had opportunities to scramble, he wouldn't take them. He's going to take them more this year. I've been assured of that. Because I have been very critical of that aspect of his game. And I'm not saying, hey, go out there, be Lenore Sellers. But go out there, convert those 3rd downs when we need you to. Eat a couple of those sacks instead of putting the ball in harm's way. I'm telling you, I have grown on Garrett Nussmeier, but not as much as our guest coming up. Now, a few more things. Obviously, we are one step in the right direction for LSU baseball Super Regional weekend. Disclaimer, I am not doing any post-game shows for any of that. I've had a few requests for that. That is not my alley, okay? We'll do one if we go to Omaha. And who knows? I might get a little frisky and want to do a post-game college baseball show. But I want it to be known that the only thing I did not want to happen was for us to lose to UALR. That, to me, was the only disastrous situation. West Virginia's going to come in here. They're going to give it their best shot. They're a really good team. Every team in the Super Regional is a good team. So you see why I don't do baseball post games. Yes, every arm outside of Case and Evans, Ianson, and Anderson, you don't feel comfortable about it. I get it. I totally understand. But, man, I just hope Jared Jones continues the home run after some brutal at-bats throughout the weekend. It just feels like something is coming. It just feels like something special is on the horizon for number 22. But, man, I'm so glad we got some of that sloppy baseball out of our system. I thought we were always going to come back and win, but my belief wavered when Daniel Dickinson could not turn the double play with Milam. So, yeah, I'm feeling good, though. I'm overall feeling good about the Super Regional weekend. All right. So, coming up next, we'll talk to a man who loves Garrett Nussmeier more than any of you. We say hi to Isaiah. Nuss has proven to be elite in one of the best conferences. Brennan says, give me Nuss all day. Alexander says, I think a lot of plays Cam Ward made last year won't translate to the NFL. And we say hi to Tony the Tiger as well. Okay. Now, coming up next, we'll talk to one of my favorite NFL draft analysts. Let's go! On a journey together with Zion Imaging. I want you to see this experience up close. And me as a wedding and event DJ, I watched how everybody had so much fun with Zion Imaging. And a big reason for their success is the team. Yes, Jaron Thomas and his family started this off as a passion project, and they have one simple goal in mind: taking your event to the next level. Whether it's a wedding, reunion, quinceañera, school or corporate event, Zion Imaging is all about family-friendly fun. And I gotta show you on this tour the high-level technology that quickly sends your video session to your phone, whether it's iPhone or Android. Yes, it's the Zion Imaging 360 spin booth experience serving North Texas, North Louisiana, South Arkansas, Orlando, and more. Give us a call, 318-469-4265. Check us out on Facebook or book us at Zion Imaging, XYANimaging.com. Alrighty, so I want to share this very hot take. Drew Beatty at Iron City Film. Cade Klubnik and Garrett Nussmeier both would have been my QB1 in last year's draft. So here's the thing. We see the Titans jersey in the background. Let's just say the Tennessee Titans called you up and they said Cam Ward is right here. We are getting, let's just say it's NFL draft night. And they have Cam Ward on the phone. They're like, no. We saw Iron City Film on Twitter say Garrett Nussmeier's better than Cam Ward. You're the GM. This is your team. Tell us now, why would you take Garrett Nussmeier over Cam Ward to be the quarterback of the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, jumping right into it. First of all, Carter, nice to meet you finally. I appreciate you having me on here, taking the time. Yeah, and because of the nature of draft discussion like this, we're always comparing these guys to the last class, right? Because we spent the whole time last draft cycle comparing Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders and all those guys to the year before. That's just the nature of the class. And I don't mean to put Cam Ward down by any means when I say stuff like this. I think Cam Ward is an outstanding player. I think he's a first-round quarterback. I think he was worth the first overall pick. I still think he's going to be good. But just to kind of give an outline of where these guys land for me. Currently, Garrett Nussmeier sitting at a top 5 grade for me, and Cam Ward finalized like a mid first. So there is a gap, but they're both great players to me. And a lot of this boils down to when you're evaluating draft prospects, quarterbacks especially, it comes down to kind of like you pick your flavor, right? There's a type of quarterbacks that there's a lot of personal bias involved in evaluating draft prospects. What you like in certain quarterbacks, certain guys like the higher floor, certain guys like the higher ceiling. You look for different traits. Certain analysts value things differently. I'm somebody that tends to fall. I always prefer guys that work in structure and work from the pocket first. That's where they succeed more. I think that translates better to the NFL level. And I think that's quarterback discourse has kind of moved to the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the guys that work out of structure. The Lenore Sellers is kind of the hot name right now in the SEC and in college football especially. Those guys are the ones that people fall in love with, fans and analysts, the athletic traits. But I don't really know that that's what succeeds at the NFL level. And that's kind of why I'm higher on guys like Cade Klubnik and Garrett Nussmeier. Nussmeier especially is somebody that I fell in love with early in the draft process last year. The Ole Miss game was the first one that really put him on my radar. I'm sure we'll talk about that extensively. I've tweeted out too. I think that was one of the most impressive quarterback performances that I've ever evaluated personally, if not the most impressive. I think that game was outstanding from him, one of the best I've ever seen. But to start with what Nussmeier does well and why I'm so high on him, I think the first thing you look at in quarterback, the first thing I always look at, I think the most important aspect is arm talent. Always is one you go back to is how much velocity their arm generates. And I think Nussmeier has no limiter on that. I don't think he's got the best arm I've ever seen. I would call it in like the top, elite upper echelon of arm talent, but it's certainly not something he struggles with. He's able to hit the windows he needs to. He can fit it into tight windows. He's got a flexible arm. He can create a lot of velocity from different arm angles. He's a pretty subpar athlete, in terms of mobility. And that's something that I think a lot of people knock him. That's why he's the general media and fans are a little bit lower on him. But that's not something I really value a whole lot in quarterbacks. If you're able to work and succeed in structure and from the pocket, I don't think you really have a need to be very mobile. And I think Nussmeier, all of the things that make quarterbacks succeed, especially young quarterbacks at the NFL level, are all of the things that Garrett Nussmeier does well to me. I think all of the things between the ears is exactly where Garrett Nussmeier lives and succeeds. He's the best processor that I've watched in recent memory. I think he's certainly the best processor in this class to me.
Okay, let me interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
What do you mean by processor? I think I know what you mean, but
yeah, for sure. When I kind of the processing bucket to me, when you break it down kind of further into different traits, it's, can you work through progressions? Can you work through reads? How well can you see the field? Are you on time within the structure of the offense? Are you getting balls out like right at or before the breaks for receivers. You're not hitting them too late, which is like, for example, go back to Lenore Sellers. That was my biggest pet peeve with him. He's somebody that's constantly late. The eyes are really, really slow. And that's when you look at young quarterbacks, that's a very common theme. Usually that's why they struggle so early, because when you move to adjust to NFL speed or SEC speed, we'll talk about guys that transfer from a lower level competition that transfer into the SEC. You see the eyes just really aren't fast enough to move with that level of competition. But Garrett Nussmeier, his eyes never get stuck. They're fluid. He's constantly able to work through to the backside without ever getting stuck. I think he does a great job constantly seeing the field. And the other thing that just, I don't know, that it's something that you value as highly as processing, but just something that's awesome to watch for me. It's something I think he's probably the best I've ever seen at is pocket management. Garrett Nussmeier, because of his dad being the quarterback coach that he is, he looks like a guy that's been coached to play quarterback since he was old enough to walk. But there's his internal clock is exactly where it needs to be. He's got a great sense for pressure from the backside and in front of him. But the way he maneuvers around the pocket, his pocket movement is just, it's really poetry in motion to watch. I mean, he's constantly exactly where he should be. He's never bailing out of clean pockets. He never creates his own pressure. And again, back to the Ole Miss game, that was something where I thought he was masterful in that game with constantly facing a D line that had 4 NFL draft prospects on it. I mean, he was constantly evading pressure, always keeps his eyes downfield when he's doing it. Not a guy that works out of structure a whole lot, but I thought when he was out of structure, he did a great job keeping his eyes downfield. And go back to the timing and anticipation aspect that I was talking about in processing. He's always on time within the structure of the offense. He's never a guy that gets behind, like on outbreakers. He's always giving the ball out right on the break. He's never giving safeties or defenders a chance to come downhill too early. And anticipation is the other thing you look at in young quarterbacks. That's a trait that you really don't see a lot of those guys have. That's something that it takes a long time playing the position at a high level to pick up. But I think Nussmeier really has kind of that sixth sense to know where his guys are going to be and where the other guys aren't going to be, to kind of throw it before it's open and be able to throw it open and give his guys a chance. That's something that I think Nussmeier excels at. So to me, it's really about being between the ears. I think that's where Nussmeier lives and where he succeeds and where a lot of young quarterbacks don't.
Interesting. There's a piece of me that thinks you're just sucking up to my audience because you have a Derrick Henry jersey in the background, which is
there's some bad blood there.
Yeah, it's a very sore subject for LSU fans. But all jokes aside, I'm a King Henry fan, by the way. But I agree. So, I do film evaluations on my channel. It's not all I do. It's 99% of what you do. And you watch the broadcast footage. You also watch the All-22. So take us through a few plays from the Ole Miss game. And I think most fans know the throw that sent the game into overtime. Everyone's familiar with the fourth down completion to Aaron Anderson. But what else stood out to you? What specific plays? The specific, because we have done so many breakdowns of that game. So from your vantage point, what plays in that game really stood out to you?
It's funny. I heard you right before I came in here, just talking like on the broadcast or on the stream before I came in here, talking about the two turnovers from that game, or the 2 interceptions, which were really bad. Like those were kind of inexcusable. And you will. I hesitate to say he's got turnover issues because I think on a general basis, I think Nussmeier does do a good job of keeping the ball out of harm's way. But there's usually like one head scratcher per game, or he'll give you just one really bad decision per game. And you saw like that. I think the first interception wasn't necessarily the worst. I think you can see some reasoning behind that. The second one was inexcusable. That was disgusting. But beyond that, I think everything, you're not in that game without Garrett Nussmeier. You certainly don't come anywhere close to winning without him. He willed that win almost single-handedly. Not to disrespect the rest of the team by any means, but he was just that good in that game. But I think to go to specific plays or specific throws, I don't have timestamps in my head. I'm like not off the top.
No,
of my head.
It's fine.
But
I can help you out. Go ahead.
There was a sidearm post. It's in the red zone. I want to say it was like early third quarter, late second half. Okay. A sidearm post in the red zone. Maybe it was Aaron Anderson that caught it, who I'd love to dote on for a little bit too. Aaron Anderson's awesome. But he was drifting back into pressure, and there really was no window to fit it into. I can't believe he did it. Obviously, the overtime throw that you mentioned, the play that always sticks out to me was early on in the game. Will Campbell actually got beat by Suntaran Perkins. That's the one thing that spots out to me. That was something I noticed early on. And Nussmeier, the pocket is really, really on display. And that one, it was a crosser that he hit. after dodging the edge rusher and kind of moving up and drifting left. Again, I can play the plays out in my head. I wish I had timestamps.
I know exactly. It was to Kyron Lacy. He stepped up.
Yes.
And that one. Yeah.
That was really the one that like had me sit up in my chair, because that was the first game of Nussmeier that I'd watched. That was what kind of locked me in to him, was seeing the ability to pull the ball down and evade that pressure, and then be able to get your eyes back up and still be able to hit that. And it's funny too, and obviously talking about the LSU game or the Ole Miss game, but people will point to, the South Carolina game and the Texas A&M game as like, you can't draft this kid, he's terrible. It's why it's really important to take all of these games in context as wholes and not look for specific things. Because were the turnovers bad in those two games? Yeah, they were bad. But there were some unbelievable throws in both of those games. Like A&M's the one you point to because you had 3 really bad interceptions, sure. But there were some really, really good throws in that A&M game. There was a lot of good and there was a lot of bad. It was pretty volatile. Same thing with South Carolina. Like that slot fade down like 60 yards downfield to the right. That one was to Aaron Anderson, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely.
That was an unbelievable throw. That's where you really see the arm talent jump off. And I think the common theme on his interceptions, usually, to go back to the Cam Ward discussion, you'll see, you'll pick up a trend when you watch as much quarterback tape as we do during these draft processes. There's one type of defense or one type of coverage issue that will cause interceptions. Like for Cam Ward, it was post snap cover 3 rotations, guys that rotated into cover 3 post snap. That was what gave Cam Ward like 3 or 4 interceptions in the 2024 season. And with Garrett Nussmeier, you saw it in his interception in the Baylor game, his interception in the South Carolina game, and one of his interceptions in the Texas A&M game. They're all a misread of the flat defender, usually in too high. So that's something that he has got to work on. And again, you got to take into context too. He's doing all of these things mentally at such a high level as a first-year starter. This is a guy that has had, no experience before this. This is his first year as a starter. And I think, again, for that to be his only kind of trend negatively as far as interceptions and turnovers go, I think is really impressive, because misreading flat defenders is a really easy issue to fix, whether that's at the LSU staff or a staff at the next level, as a rookie in the NFL. So I think all of his turnovers, I won't say all, but a majority of his turnovers, you can point to a specific thing that he was seeing and not seeing correctly. There was a cause for them. It's not just, a god-awful decision. So I think that's an important thing to note. And to answer the question that was just there, his biggest weakness, again, the one head scratching decision per game is the one you go back to. You got to reel that in a little bit. Again, I don't want to say he's got turnover issues, because I think on a general basis, he does a pretty good job. But there is one decision per game that you'd like to reel in a little bit. And kind of the only other thing I would point to is he has a weird habit of kind of hitting receivers in the ankles on outbreakers. It's only on throws outside the numbers for some reason. Usually it's like 10 or 15 yard outs. He'll just have a weird habit of kind of having his ball deflate midair, and he'll hit a receiver in the ankles or hit him really low on the boundary. But past those two things, there's not a whole lot I can nitpick about Garrett Nussmeier. Again, I think on a general basis, he does everything really well that I look for personally in a quarterback.
All right, I do have 2. All right. I felt the deep ball accuracy would have been better last year.
Yeah, I can see that too. For a first-year starter, and because of the amount of the highlight throws you got as a deep accuracy, I can kind of forgive some of the misses. But for sure, you'd like to see it be a little bit more consistent. And it was a lot of overthrows, usually on like the 40 to 50 plus yard, like the really deep throws. He would kind of lose a little bit of this touch because he was having to put so much into it that he kind of lost control of it and it got away from him. And a lot of it was overthrow related. But again, I'd rather deal with that than I would underthrows. So again, I think all of his issues are very fixable. And again, for being a first year guy going to his second year, I would feel very, very confident about all of his issues.
And I know in the NFL, because LSU fans watch what Joe Burrow did.
Yeah.
And Joe was a willing scrambler. And Garrett Nussmeier said in interviews, he's going to do more of the running aspect when a rush lane is available. Would you agree that that's also something that he could do when because it felt when I watched him, there were opportunities where he could pick up the easy first down and then just slide down.
Yeah, again, I think there were definitely some times he was hesitant to run. And I think that stems from him just, knowing and being self-aware that he's not the best athlete in the world, the most twitchy runner in the world. But again, like if I was going to bet on a quarterback to have an issue, I would so much rather have to fix a quarterback being hesitant to run
Exactly.
and hanging in the pocket too long versus having to teach a guy, like a Lenore Sellers who wants to bail out of a clean pocket within, 1 to 2 seconds, and having to wrangle that in and teach him to stay in a pocket. It is, 10,000 times easier to fix Garrett Nussmeier's rushing issue with getting him to take the 7-yard scramble every now and then. And even if you don't, that's something I can absolutely live with. If you're gonna leave a 7-yard rush on the field, but it's gonna give me 3 or 4 plays in that game where you sat and kept your eyes downfield in a scramble drill, and gave us 2 or 3 first downs that way, I'm cool living with that. But again, I think it's a much easier issue to break, teaching a guy to take a 7 to 10-yard scramble when he needs to, trying to make a play downfield rather than teaching a guy to hang in the pocket, like a Lenore Sellers again.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting NFL debate because, like you said, starting this conversation, most quarterbacks or most neutral observers that don't watch every snap like you do want the tools. They want Sellers. Like they 1,000% want Sellers. And I think some of that is because of the excitement. Lenore Sellers is so elite at breaking tackles and running. It's stupid how good he is at that.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, like the Clemson game is just
that's ridiculous.
I've never, and those are NFL guys who was breaking tackles.
Oh yeah.
And then also the fantasy community is like, hell, I want Lenore Sellers.
Yeah.
Because for those that don't play fantasy, the rushing is way more important than the actual passing, which is crazy to me, by the way. But
that irks me.
I wish rushing matters so much. And it's interesting because those two play each other early in the year, but this is where I was like, I got to get this guy on, because you not only said you would take Garrett Nussmeier over the great Cam Ward, who I've said it. I don't know if I would have done that last year. And let me see what I really like Cam Ward as an NFL prospect, and you said the same thing. So I don't.
Yeah.
You just said Garrett is elite, which I love. I hope you're right. You also said you would take Klubnik, however you say it. And you also said Cade has a slightly higher grade. You said Cade is 1A, Garrett Nussmeier is 1B. So, Drew, you probably don't know this, but you probably also kind of do because you like college football. LSU has lost 5 consecutive season openers. They have not won a season opener under Brian Kelly. If they were to hear that, they would say, shit, this guy came in and told us Garrett Nussmeier is a quarterback that can manage a pocket, take an offense to another level. But gosh darn it, in the first game of the season, we got to go up against the guy Drew has a higher grade on than Garrett Nussmeier. So, Drew, tell the people why you like Cade so much, and what does LSU need to do when they face Cade in the season opener?
Yeah, I did. I put 1A and 1B in that ranking because I didn't feel good enough putting Nussmeier at 2 because I think they are so they are dead even basically. Like on my early 2026 draft board, they are 1 and 2 right now. So it is so similar. You could flip it however way you wanted. But I not to sound, kind of anti-LSU here, but I don't know what you do as defensive coordinator because I don't see a lot of weakness with Cade Klubnik. You have the 1 or 2 to pull out against Garrett Nussmeier. I'm not sure I could point you to a major downside with Cade Klubnik because I think he's that good. I think, there are
okay. All right. So
there are limitations in the Clemson offense.
Stop. You think he's that good? All right. So let me ask you this. Is Cade a better NFL draft prospect than Jaden Daniels?
Oh, that's a tough one because I don't think I was anywhere near the level of evaluator that I needed to be when Jaden Daniels was coming out. I still had a top 10 grade on Jaden Daniels. I really liked him coming out, but I'm not sure I have the faith in myself as an evaluator in the 2024 class to do him justice as a prospect. I think I had worries about Daniels processing that I don't have with Cade Klubnik. I'll say that way. But again, I would hesitate to give a full concrete answer just because I don't feel confident enough in how I was evaluating back when Daniels was coming out. But either way, Daniels has answered any and all questions by now. So.
Yeah. Obviously, as many people know, that Jaden's top 5 LSU Tiger for me ever.
Oh, yeah.
And he could do no wrong in my eyes. So for you to say that Cade is even in that conversation, all right, is insane to me. It really is insane because I've watched a decent amount of Cade. You crunchy I mean, you do the whole shebang. And I guess I see a very good quarterback. I really do. The fumbles, the ball handling can get a little weird for me. I thought his passing numbers would be a little bit more productive than they were. What he has, like 200-300-yard games from last year or something like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
Again, I'm a very anti-production guy. Like, I don't really factor stats into my evaluation at all.
Oh, you don't?
No, I don't even look at the stat sheet 99% of the time. I'm fully just grading off of film grade and what I see with my eyes.
Okay. All right. So I could see that now, because if that is what you're evaluating, then yeah, I'm with you. Cade's got a lot to like. But I interrupted you. The floor is yours. Let the audience know what makes Cade special in your eyes.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the same reasons I love Garrett Nussmeier. I think they're not far off from each other stylistically. I think Cade is a much better athlete as far as mobility goes. He's got a lot more, and also Clemson uses him a lot more than LSU does, obviously because of that reason. And like the designed rushing game, I think he adds a much larger layer to the offense as a runner. I just think he's a better straight line athlete. There were some ball security issues with Cade for sure. That's an issue he's got to clean up. Again, that's not one that I like. Like Cam Ward had the same things. That's not something I factor very highly into quarterback evaluation going to the draft. Fumbles can be fixed, within 3 months with the NFL coaching staff. But as far as Cade goes, yeah, I think he's another very good processor. I don't think Clemson asks him to do anywhere near the level of processing that LSU asks Nussmeier to do. That's why I'm much more impressed with Nussmeier as a processor, because I think he's asked to do more, and he handles all of that. I think Cade handles all of what Clemson asks him to do. It's just not quite as much as what LSU asks of us. But I think Klubnik is a very good processor as well. I think in between the ears, he's got all the same, his eyes don't get stuck. He works through progressions like he should. He's always on time. He's a good anticipatory thrower. Again, I'm not sure he has quite the level of anticipation that Nuss does. But I think his arm is slightly better. I think they're kind of in the same tier. But I think he gets a little bit more zip and he has a little bit more distance than Nussmeier does. I think he prefers to work out of structure a little bit more than Nussmeier does. Which I can take or leave. I prefer when guys don't work out of structure, like I said earlier. But that's kind of Cade lives there a little bit more. And whether that was a result of him having not quite the offensive line that LSU had last year, or whether that was something he preferred to do, I can't really know. But again, I think very good athlete, very good arm, accurate all over the field. I think Cade Klubnik is one of the best quarterbacks I've ever watched at working under pressure. The amount of times he was getting sawed in half by an edge rusher and still was perfectly accurate 40, 45 yards downfield is something I haven't seen a lot before Cade Klubnik. Like the NC State game, and they blew them out of the water. But he was only in the game for basically the first half. But I could point to 2 or 3 reps just in that game alone where he was getting bisected by an edge rusher and still hit a slot fade, dead on the money, 30, 40, 50 yards downfield. So that's a really impressive part of Cade Klubnik's game for me, is how well he operates under pressure and how calm he stays. And that's something that I didn't give Nussmeier credit for that I should have. Both him and Cade especially do a great job. And it's something that's sorely missing in a lot of quarterback prospects nowadays to me, is guys that are willing to hang in the pocket and take a shot and deliver a pass over the middle of the field. It's something that I had with Cam Ward, where guys, they want to pull their eyes down too early and bail out of pocket because they're scared of taking a hit. And both Cade and Nussmeier both do a great job of putting their body on the line. They're both tough as nails, and they will take a shot in the pocket to deliver a pass over the middle of the field. And that's something you don't see a lot anymore, at least that I haven't noticed in my recent quarterback evaluation. That's something they both deserve a lot of credit for in my eyes. And yeah, I think, again, for a lot of the same reasons, I think that Klubnik is a little bit of a better athlete, a little bit better arm, works more out of structure. And I don't know if he's quite the level of processor that Nussmeier is, but they both do a lot of things very similarly at a very high level.
I'll be honest, man. So I started doing radio in South Carolina, in the upstate. And it's like half Clemson, half South Carolina fans. And it was when I started evaluating high school quarterbacks. And Cade was one of the best high school quarterbacks I've ever seen. and they beat everybody 70-0. So it kind of neutered him in many ways, because you can't, when you're beating guys 70-0, you really can't do anything. You're just going out there and just clobbering people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that affected him early in his career. But I saw a lot of the things you saw. I was like, this is one of the best high school quarterbacks I have ever seen. Athletically, all those different things. And 2023, his first year as a starter, was so disappointing for me. And then 2024 happened. I was like, okay, that's the guy right there. That's the guy. And I'm excited. I'm so excited for this quarterback duel. From your vantage point, because you said you're really high on Aaron Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Break down, before we get into LSU's receivers, what did you feel watching the Clemson receivers?
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't done deep dives specifically into a lot of these players. I haven't hit receivers yet. I've been mostly handling quarterback and defensive line so far in summer scouting. So none of this is concrete. It's just what I've seen peripherally on tape. I wasn't, blown away by anybody in Clemson's supporting cast. I think Antonio Williams is a name that's picking up a lot of steam right now, and for the 2026 draft. I saw a couple of flashes from him, but nothing like super consistent that made me, I need to drop everything and watch this guy. Aaron Anderson popped much more than anybody on Clemson.
Okay, yeah, go on.
I'll say that. But yeah, obviously, like Jake Browning-Stool and Phil Maffa, both guys that went in this past draft, were both good, but they're both gone now. I will Bryant Wesco, I think is his name, right? The freshman for Clemson. He's probably the guy that impressed me most. That 2027 receiver class is going to be unbelievable. I thought he was really twitchy, really, really good athlete. Probably my favorite of that receiver group from what I've seen. But yeah, nobody that really popped at a crazy level to me on their team.
Okay, but you texted me and you said, hey, I want to talk about Aaron Anderson.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Obviously he popped to you.
He's a guy that really did give me that, this guy needs to be first on my receiver watch list when I get to those. Because he's got, he's what, 5'8". He's really a really short, smaller stature guy, not somebody that is an off the bus kind of guy when you look at him. But man, he fights like a junkyard dog for a receiver who's 5'8". He really does a great job fighting through contact at the catch point. I thought he did a good job putting himself in a advantageous position at the catch point. He's really, really athletic, really twitchy, which you expect from a guy who's kind of smaller and plays more in the slot like he does at 5'8". But a really, really good athlete. I thought he was very physical for his size. I didn't see any drop issues. I haven't looked at the numbers like drop rate percentage or anything, but just from one of the games I watched, I never noticed drop issues or issues with his hands. But yeah, certainly a guy that popped off the tape to me, and somebody I need to hit a deep dive into as soon as I get to receivers.
Yeah, and going back to Garrett here, it's interesting to me because I'll be honest, I do film breakdowns. I probably don't know as much as you do. All right. I probably don't watch as much because your job is just trying to find the best NFL draft prospects. Okay. And it's a hard job. This shit is hard. There's so many different variables you don't know. And I always say that in every film study that I do. But I want to ask you about the LSU offensive structure, because that is something you have to do when you're evaluating quarterbacks.
Yep.
One point, and I had a viewer reach out, and he's not a big Nuss guy because of the turnovers. If you're old school, you're like, turnovers, no. I don't like a guy that turns it over, right? And it was tough for LSU fans to see that, Drew, because Jaden did not turn the ball over.
Yeah.
He just didn't do it. And Garrett Nussmeier does it a fair amount. But my defense always is Garrett is being asked to do very difficult things for a college offense. And I do film studies on Tennessee. I do film studies on Texas and Oklahoma in particular. And not necessarily OU, but those offenses just open things up so much more easily. So give me your thoughts on the LSU offensive play calling and the overall offensive structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And to contrast, it was so refreshing to watch the LSU offensive structure as an evaluator after, the last quarterback I evaluated for last class was Jackson Dart. And the contrast between the Ole Miss offense and the LSU offensive structure is so refreshing as an evaluator, because everything. That's why I was completely out on Jackson Dart from the beginning. Is because you have to me, processing is one of the most, like, I have to see the gears turning and I have to see the correct process mentally from a quarterback before I can feel good about them as an NFL prospect. And Jackson Dart, you couldn't, because they never asked him to. Everything in the Ole Miss offense is a one read RPO. Everything is pre-snap, already set. You don't have to do any thinking after the snap. There's never any mental process involved in those offenses. Same thing for Tennessee, where everything is ridiculously spread out. Everything is predetermined. There's very little processing or very little thinking involved in those offenses. So that's why, I was never a Joe Milton or a Hendon Hooker or any of those guys, because it's for the same reasons. That Josh Heupel offense and then the Lane Kiffin offenses, you don't fault them for that, because their job is not to get these guys ready for the NFL. Their job is to be successful at an NFL level or at a college level, and then those offenses work. There's a reason they run them. But as an evaluator, when you're trying to judge how ready these guys are for the next level, it makes it pretty impossible, because you don't ever get to see. They're not ever asked to think. But when you look at the LSU offensive structure, Garrett Nussmeier is asked to do so much mentally, because they're running a full-on pro-style NFL offense with NFL passing concepts. And Garrett Nussmeier is being asked to do everything, or I won't say everything, but a lot post-snap that they're asked to do at an NFL level, in an NFL-style offense. They're all, like I said, very pro-style passing concepts. So that's why I'm so impressed, and why I call Garrett Nussmeier one of the better processors that I've watched in recent memory, because he's being asked to do so much, and I think he gives you everything and more that they're asking him to do.
Why do you think LSU couldn't run the ball last year as effectively? Because you also texted me and said you like Caden Durham a lot, but their run game had massive issues. So why do you think that was?
That one I'm not sure I have a concrete answer for, because that was probably the first guy that popped watching Garrett Nussmeier the first time around this past draft cycle is Caden Durham, who I believe he was a true freshman, wasn't he?
Yeah, true freshman. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's outstanding. He was unbelievable for a true freshman. I was extremely impressed with him. And the offensive line, that was one of the better offensive lines. I wasn't really a big Will Campbell guy, but I thought he was a good run blocker. I was a huge Miles Frazier guy. I thought he was outstanding. Emory Jones, I wasn't huge on him, but again, I thought that all those three guys were outstanding run blockers, especially at a collegiate level. I wasn't phenomenally impressed with the center or the other guard, who I don't have their names, unfortunately, on the top of my head. Yeah. But again, all of the pieces were there from a personnel standpoint. Having a running back who I was extremely impressed with, having three, top 100 NFL offensive linemen, that the personnel wise, it should have, I didn't, I wish I could go back and pay attention specifically to the schematics of the run game, because it very well could have been a problem there. But it's not something that I was, paying super close attention to. But to me, it would have to be schematic, because, it clearly was not a personnel issue to me, because Caden Durham, I think, is outstanding, and you have one of the best offensive line units in the country. The common denominator there would be schematic. But again, it's not something that I've paid close enough attention to feel like I can give a concrete answer on.
Hey, I really appreciate that. It's one thing I strive to do, is don't try and say something that I don't have a gazillion percent answer to. That's why I appreciate your opinion so much. And Caden Durham has huge fan bases on this channel. Everybody,
I see why.
Yeah. So we talked about the offensive linemen. Now, do you think Garrett can overcome 4 new starters coming in? Now, I know you don't know who those guys are. I'm not asking you to know who those guys are. But you mentioned earlier that his pocket mobility and pocket ability to finagle around back there is really good. So for those that are really concerned that Will Campbell's no longer here and the rest of the group, can you assure the LSU fans that Garrett can work around maybe some offensive line struggles next year?
Again, I'm not sure I can assure anybody of anything, but if I had to take a single quarterback in the entire country to handle a bad offensive line, the first name on my list would be Garrett Nussmeier. I bet if you asked a lot of the LSU fan base or a lot of the collegiate fan base if they wanted to swap their quarterback for Lenore Sellers right now, a lot of them would say yes.
Yeah.
But I can tell you right now, if you put Lenore Sellers behind 4 brand new offensive linemen, it would be disastrous. Because these young toolsy quarterbacks, the pressure and the mental aspect of managing a pocket is something that they don't develop for years and years and years. And it's why I love Garrett Nussmeier so much right now, because he has it as a first-year starter. So when you put, any quarterback, especially this young, behind that offensive line, Again, I don't know where the protections fall, whether it's the center's job, whether it's Garrett Nussmeier's job. I didn't see him communicate a whole lot at the line of scrimmage on tape. But again, that's something that happens behind the scenes. I don't know whose responsibility that is.
Yeah, of course.
But that's going to be something that you have to gel with, having a brand new offensive line, being able to get protections on the same level or on the same page between the quarterback and a brand new offensive line. But again, just having guys who I assume will be inexperienced because they're coming in, whether it's transfers or whether it's young guys coming up. There's a lot that it's going to take time to gel with a new offensive line. So when I talk about Garrett Nussmeier's having, his internal clock is set perfectly. He knows when he has to get rid of the ball. He has that sixth sense of knowing, hey, I got to get rid of this thing. The pressure's going to be here. I think he has a great job sensing it from the backside because that's an intangible thing. Like a quarterback, to be able to sense pressure from their blind side, you can't see it. It's blind side for a reason. You just got to know when it's there. And I think Garrett has that. He just has that intangible sixth sense to know when he has to get rid of the ball, when he has to move. But also, the just having kind of as a last resort too, how well he maneuvers in the pocket and how well he avoids sacks while staying in the pocket is a really, really underrated aspect. And I think it's something that would give me confidence as an LSU fan, even with 4 brand new offensive linemen coming in.
So you say you've watched the QBs, and what was the other position you've really evaluated up to this point?
I have done deep dives into edge rushers, interior defensive line, quarterbacks, and I'm starting on running backs this week. I'm halfway through.
All right, so I'm sure you've watched the Clemson defensive line.
Oh, yeah. Not something I would feel comfortable with if I was Garrett Nussmeier. I'd be scared. Because Peter Woods and TJ Parker are both outstanding. They're both top 10 players on my early 2026 board. I think they've also got some other names that aren't quite, Jeremiah Alexander, the Alabama transfer, is supposed to be a big one. They have another defensive tackle whose name I'm drawing a blank on, but is also a guy that's being talked about for the 2026 class. So that's a very, very good defensive line filled with NFL talent. I mean, it's probably the best unit or one of the best units, if not the best in the whole country. And again, TJ Parker is probably my favorite player that I've watched so far. Just from an enjoyment perspective, that guy has white hot motor, just relentless. He's outstanding. Yeah. Peter Woods. The only thing holding me back on Peter Woods is supposed medical stuff. I haven't been able to get concrete information, but there's some supposed medical stuff with Peter Woods. But as far as talent goes, I mean, he's one of the twitchiest interior defensive linemen I've watched in a long time. So you don't ever want to judge, especially a brand new offensive line unit. You don't want to judge them on their first week because there's so much you have to learn from experience to get that cohesion as an offensive line unit together. But you could not get a worse first week assignment than the Clemson defensive line, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's going to be tough because LSU rebuilt their secondary, go up against Klubnik, Wesco, and all those guys, and new offensive line going up against new defensive line, and then of course a guy on the opposite sidelines, a national championship winning coach. So it's going to be a great matchup. It's going to be the Drew Iron City Film Bowl.
Yeah.
Nobody is higher on those two quarterbacks.
I'll be seated for that game. I can't wait.
Yeah. Let's get to a few comments. It is interesting. So LA Mom is one of our sharpest viewers. She, from an LSU perspective, she would call and say, hey, Jackson Dart's about to kill us. And she was right a few years ago. But Sam says the same thing. He agrees with you that Jackson Dart is a little overvalued as an NFL quarterback. Let's see if we get a few more questions here. Blanche agrees. He says, teach a guy to make a forward pass or run. The media thinks it's easier to teach passing. I'm in agreement with you there. Mm-hmm. Brian says Cam is a tad bit more developed. Garrett probably has higher upside. And that's okay. Go on.
Yeah, I'd probably say it's kind of the flip if it were me. Okay. And I think upside is become we've jumped the shark so much on upside and ceiling in draft media, I think. But to me, I think Cam didn't get enough credit as a guy, as a pocket passer, a guy who worked in structure. I thought he was much better in structure than he was out of structure, which is, he got this rep as the pure, Patrick Mahomes out of structure creator. But there's a lot of there's things that worry me with Cam Ward. Like the accuracy is the main thing. That's why what kept him from being a blue chip guy for me is I would feel very scared as a team putting all my chips in the Cam Ward basket when the accuracy issues were as bad as they were. To me, Garrett Nussmeier doesn't have any issue that was as bad as Cam Ward's accuracy issues were. So I feel much more comfortable calling Garrett Nussmeier a more NFL ready prospect in that way. But I do think, if Cam, because of the little bit higher athletic upside, if Cam Ward can figure out those accuracy issues, I would say he probably has a little bit of a higher ceiling, but I think they're both such great quarterbacks that's very minuscule. But I would call Garrett Nussmeier more NFL ready right now.
All right, a few more spicy ones for you. Do you have a little bit more time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So on the count of three, I want you to do your crystal ball. I know it's impossible for you to know which team Garrett's going to play for next year. Okay. But every LSU fan wants Garrett Nussmeier with the damn Saints. Because obviously the dad's there, and even more so than the dad's son kind of, semi-LeBron storyline that you would have there. Garrett's a Louisiana guy, and Saints fans believe the Saints hate LSU. Okay.
That's funny. Tennessee thinks the same thing about Tennessee.
Yes. It's crazy.
It's crazy how that works.
But let's put crystal ball. Do you think Garrett and Kellen would be a good fit for what? Because it seems like it wouldn't, because Kellen Moore had Jalen Hurts and he had Justin Herbert, who I guess is kind of like Garrett, but Justin's a way better athlete. But do you think Garrett and Kellen Moore with the Saints would be something?
I mean, potentially. I'm a player over scheme fit kind of thing. I think you mold your scheme to the player. You don't let a scheme fit hold you back from drafting a great player. And honestly, I'm not sure I would take Kellen Moore. I'm not sure Kellen Moore is in the picture at that point. Because I think the Saints are going to be bad. That would have been if you had to pick my early pick for first overall.
He's going to have he wouldn't have taken the job if they weren't going to give him at least 2 years. I don't think it's
you would think. I hope, just on a pure NFL, process basis, I hope they give him that. But again,
they can go.
The Saints have not reeked of great NFL process in recent years.
Okay.
So I'm not sure I have a ton of faith in that front office, but again, when I'm doing this, I think like you don't pass for a worse player because he fits your scheme better when you're drafting, in my eyes. So I'm not intimately familiar with Kellen Moore's scheme. I don't know how well. I would struggle to find a scheme where Garrett Nussmeier didn't fit, unless you just want your quarterback to run all the time. Because I think he's so advanced mentally that he can kind of gel with whatever you want to make work on offense.
I already know what team he's going to play with. You want me to tell you?
I'd love to hear it.
It's going to break your heart, okay? Because we've been talking about, and it just clicked. It just clicked. All right. Drew, you might not know this, but overall, I have been pretty accurate at guessing which quarterbacks would succeed and not succeed. All right. And the reason why I've taken this so seriously is because when I was your age, I went on a TV show and just shitted on Joe Flacco and Matt Ryan. They went to Delaware and Boston College. I went on TV and said, no, and obviously both of them had fantastic NFL careers. And Joe Flacco is still playing. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I was like, from this point forward, I'm actually going to sit and watch every single quarterback. And one guy I never quite understood is actually another Clemson quarterback by the name of Trevor Lawrence. All right. I was never a Trevor Lawrence guy. I never understood the generational BS. Okay. Trevor is going to be ass yet again this next year. And he's not going to be ass enough to where the Jaguars aren't going to be the #1 overall pick, but they'll be in the top 10. And the Jaguars are going to be ready to move on. And Garrett Nussmeier next year will be in your own division with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Dude, they sent their 26 first for Hunter, didn't they?
Oh, that's right. Damn it. I should have thought.
Although, again, I agree with you on the thought process. Like, I think Trevor Lawrence has been given way longer of a leash than he ever deserved. Again, I was not evaluating when he came out, so I can't speak to him during the draft process, but every bit of NFL tape that I've watched on him, I have not been impressed with. So I do question the kind of talk around him as an NFL quarterback that I don't know that he deserves most of the kind of pedigree that we give him most of the time. Let's
go to Rodriguez, best name I have heard in a while. Garrett has NFL bloodlines from his dad, must clean his gunslinger mentality up. Cam Warren has to play more in rhythm. Cliff says Nussmeier advanced mentally. He couldn't change a play at the line all of last year. Well, he did change some without calling a timeout. Yeah, LSU would burn a few timeouts too many, but I don't know if that's on him. But Cliff disagrees with you. He says Garrett does not have the mental acumen necessary yet.
Yeah, again, when you look at guys at the line of scrimmage making checks and guys that are very vocal at the line of scrimmage, it's always an interesting thing from a film watching perspective, because a lot of that, that's all in meeting rooms. I don't know whose responsibility is what at the line of scrimmage. Teams split, certain teams, the center is responsible for protection. Certain teams, the quarterback's responsible for protections. Certain quarterbacks are allowed to check at the line. Certain quarterbacks are given a much longer leash to change plays at the line of scrimmage and have the freedom to audible and change what they're doing depending on what they see. Certain quarterbacks are told, hey, don't ever change the line of scrimmage. You're doing exactly what I tell you. So that to me is a very difficult thing for us as fans and evaluators to judge, because you're not in the meeting rooms, you're not in the locker rooms, you don't know who is given what responsibilities and what freedoms at the line and whose job is what. So that's something that I try not to ever speculate on. So when I call him advanced mentally, I more mean post snap and what we see in his ability to look through reads post snap and make good decisions and throw with, be on time within the structure of the offense, that kind of things. When I say he's advanced mentally, I really have no way to know what he's like in the meeting rooms, what he's like pre-snap at the line of scrimmage, but just because I don't know who has what responsibilities and freedoms most of the time. Your
evaluation of Tyler Shough was what?
Not what a lot of people had. I mean, again, like I thought, my thought process last year was after you miss out on Cam Ward, like just take whoever, because I think they're all bad. But which again, I hate to come on here and just be that negative, but that quarterback class was brutal. I thought if you were going to take one, to me, it probably should have been Tyler Shough or Jalen Milroe, because I thought they were guys with actual physical tools to make something at the next level. I think Tyler Shough at least had the blend of a guy that had, has an NFL level arm, has the NFL level frame, the prototypical quarterback frame you're looking for, being that 6'5", very big pocket passer stature. I thought he was generally very accurate at all levels of the field, which is a rare combination to see somebody with that level of arm talent and that accuracy. That's why, again, if you're going to take a shot on somebody, I feel a little bit more comfortable with Tyler Shough. But kind of the complete antithesis to Cade Klubnik, who we were talking about earlier. I thought he was disastrously bad under pressure. That was his biggest weakness to me. I thought he kind of crumbled. That was where all the bad decisions came. There were some very Will Levis-y moments on that tape when he got some.
I feel the same way.
Some pressure on him. Obviously compounded. I think some of that comes from a fear of the medical history that he's had, because he's got a very scary injury history. Obviously, one of the older prospects, probably the last guy to ever be drafted who was born in the 1900s. So that's something you gotta be wary of. So all of that, again, he was a guy, I had like 4 or 5 of the quarterbacks, like that quarterback 2 spot could have gone to 3 or 4 guys, all who had high day 3 grades to me. But Cam Ward was the only quarterback I had before a day 3 grade last year.
Man, I was watching the franchise guy on YouTube. Love that guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he loves Tyler Shough. And I was like, I don't. Dude, I felt the same way you do. I just didn't see it. And the thing is, people were dunking on him for that Stanford little flip. That's one play.
Yeah.
I just didn't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see, again, I get why people would fall in love with him. I understand the appeal at certain levels. But again, it's what I was going back to earlier, where I talk about, why processing is so important to me. Is that's where I thought he struggled a lot. That was, again, Louisville was an offense that asked him to do, some things mentally that I don't think he excelled at a lot. I thought sometimes his eyes would get stuck. I thought he struggled to get through progressions cleanly and efficiently. There were some decision-making issues. I didn't think the timing or anticipation were particularly bad. I thought those were fine. But just purely from a progression standpoint in his processing, I thought that was an area where he lacked a little bit, which scares me for being an older prospect. When you're looking at a guy as old as he is, you want to feel more comfortable about the mental aspects of his game. If you're going to take a shot on a guy that's, 24, 25, whatever he was.
I will say that Notre Dame throw is still the most insane red zone. You know,
Yeah.
I mean that I was like, that is Matrix stuff. But that's why, like, you shouldn't fall in love with the guy, because if I were, and this is a very great all-time quarterback, all right, that I'm about to say. If I were to say, look, the 20 best throws purely from the pocket ever, take their 20 best throws. Matthew Stafford is the best quarterback I've ever seen. If you're just doing it by their best throws from the pocket, because that dude is a freaking sorcerer, all right? But he's not the best quarterback ever. That's why you got to sit and watch the full games, how the plays are sequenced. That's why I don't take this stuff too seriously, because if you're looking at it from, an evaluation standpoint, if you were just to put Lenore Sellers, Clemson's tape, I'd be like, that is the best ball carrier I've ever watched.
Yeah.
It's Barry Sanders. Like, that's how good of a ball carrying game that guy had versus Clemson. So it's very important to watch the full games. And when I did that with Tyler Shuck, I watched the Stanford game. It was tough, right? And that was the worst defense that in the whole ACC. But there you go. Now, Drew, before we skedaddle here, is there anything LSU related? I know you said you haven't really watched everyone, but we talked about Aaron Anderson and Caden Durham, who you said really stood out to you. From your vantage point, was there anything else about LSU that kind of stood out to you? Because one thing I found to be interesting is there were a few guys, especially with Will Campbell, because you said you weren't as high on Will Campbell as others. And that was actually a little bit more common than I thought, right? What was our man Nimbu your number one guy?
Well, see, it was weird. Like tape-wise, just because I only grade off tape grade, which kind of gets me in trouble sometimes. I like Josh Simmons better tape-wise, but again, he had the major medical concerns and he had
Ohio
issues and stuff like that.
No.
Yeah, he was probably my favorite, but Armand Nimbu was a close second. Yeah.
Okay. But one thing that was weird was guys I respect were talking about the technique of the LSU offensive linemen. What was your did you feel watching that their technique was off, or what did you feel that at all, or was it just athletic that the players themselves?
Oh, yeah, no, not at all. In fact, I thought the technique was the best part of Will Campbell's game. And also, you saw that carry over with Miles Frazier, who was a guy I was huge on.
Oh, okay.
I was probably the highest guy on Miles Frazier that I saw. But again, I think all of my issues with Will Campbell stemmed from an athletic limitation perspective. And you had the whole arm length conversation that was just got so disgustingly out of hand. Just me as an evaluator, arm length to me is not what makes somebody a tackle or not. It's foot speed. Like foot speed makes up for short arms. To stay outside, there's guys like I thought Marcus Bowe from Purdue, who everybody thought was a guard. I thought he was fine to stay outside with 31-inch arms because he was athletic. To me, that was Will Campbell's problem. Was he had a combination of being kind of a limited athlete while also being short-armed. But I thought, like he had some of the most fundamentally sound technique from an offensive lineman that I saw in last year's draft class.
Okay, and then you also said Frazier. So you feel, because Brad Davis has critics, the LSU offensive line coach, you feel that the unit from you watching them are being coached well and technique-wise, they're sound.
Certainly. I never saw any theme continuously between the three LSU offensive linemen that I watched. I never saw something show up on tape that would have flagged the coach to me. There was nothing, no common theme that popped off the tape to me that would make me think there was something wrong with the coaching.
Yeah, and on our Patreon, we just released a deep dive on Brad Davis. Because recruiting-wise, he's the best recruiter LSU's ever had as an offensive line coach. So it does make me feel better because, everyone felt that unit underperformed last year. And they did. I think they would also tell you that as well, because LSU couldn't get that consistent run game going. But, Drew, we really appreciate your time. You joined us for over an hour. It's pretty normal for our first-time guests. So when we have you on again, we won't keep you on for forever. We do this with all our guests. We always ask our guests to give us their best let's go. So, Drew, let's hear it, baby.
Okay, let's go. Come on. There we
Oh,
go.
I didn't know you had it in you, man.
Come on now.
I like it.
I gotta bring the energy for the first time.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Absolutely.
So
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. It was a great time.
yeah, and we appreciate independent thinkers. We let people that maybe want to praise a guy like Garrett Nussmeier at a high level like you did, or criticize like you did so, some of the LSU things. So we really appreciate that. Make sure you go give him a follow at Iron City Film. He just released a 6-minute montage of his favorite Garrett Nussmeier throws. And the funny thing is, we just talked about the Ole Miss game. We just talked about the South Carolina game. We talked about the A&M game. We did not talk about the Baylor game. There
my goodness.
Sorcery throws.
Unbelievable. That was, again, you try not to put too much weight in like non-playoff bowl games as an evaluator. Right. That's a thing. But it's hard not to when there's that many fun throws in one. I mean, the amount of off-platform drifting back, like Tony Romo is the guy that really screams to me when I watch Garrett Nussmeier. Like that's a very Tony Romo-esque. But I mean, like the sideline throw where he's drifting back in the pocket to again, I believe I keep wanting to say it was Aaron Anderson because I feel like it was so much on tape. Yeah, or that crazy toe tap drifting back. One of the most insane throws on all of his tape. Definitely one of the craziest that I've seen. But there was just baffling throw after throw after throw in that Baylor game.
Yeah, and a lot of people think I'm a film expert. You're the film expert. I will also say a guy that is very hard on quarterbacks is JT O'Sullivan. All right.
Yeah.
He's probably the best draft or probably the best QB evaluator doing content consistently, right? Yeah. He's definitely in the top 3 or 4.
Oh, yeah.
So just out of nowhere, he tweets out this Garrett Nussmeier. I don't know if you saw this or not. He said this Garrett Nussmeier first half versus Baylor is insane. I was like, wow. JT O'Sullivan out of nowhere. So and the funny thing, Drew, is I get called the Garrett Nussmeier Glazer. I do all the time. It's crazy. It's crazy. I like to remind people we're very lucky to have this guy as our QB, and we're very lucky to have you tonight, Drew. We'll talk to you soon, okay, buddy?
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you again.
All right. That is Iron City Film. Yeah, we'll have him on again, Cliff. It is interesting, though. Okay. This will be an overall positive Garrett Nussmeier video. Even though at the beginning, I said what I said about Cam Ward. I would not do what Drew said and take Garrett Nussmeier over Cam Ward in last year's draft. But that was a Titans writer. Garrett's that dude, y'all. But what about the turnovers? I will tell you this. If Garrett Nussmeier was in Texas's offense, they win the national championship. Quinn Ewers sucks. Texas got to where they are with sucky quarterback play. If Garrett had the easy layups that Quinn Ewers had, they would have won the Natty. Okay? Now, it is important. Major takeaways. We always do this with our guests. Did it with Charles last night. We'll do it again here. This isn't just all positive. Cade Klubnik, Drew thinks is better than Garrett. He also said what he said about the Clemson defensive line. He agrees. He says that unit is special. Now, is Drew Mel Kiper Jr.? No. Is he JT O'Sullivan? No. Is he Bill Belichick? No. But as an independent viewer trying to make a name for himself in the NFL draft community, and I actually agreed with a lot of what he had to say. All right. So, yeah, fun guess. Fun guess. Let's go to Jared. If he could stop throwing it to the other team, he's a number 1 pick in Heisman. Yeah, I will say this, and this is why I think the draft community, and Drew says he's just a film guy. This is part of the problem I have with Drew, and we talked about this as well. Okay. Garrett is a refreshing quarterback to watch. Why do I say that? Well, if you were to rank every SEC quarterback based on their mobility alone, Garrett is probably 15th or 16th. Here's the thing, though. You can't run away from the NFL guys. Only Jaden can run away from the NFL guys and Lamar and a few others. Can't run away from them. And even then, those guys mostly play in structure. They do. There's a few quarterbacks in the SEC that can run away from NFL guys. I would say that there's two just purely off athleticism, and that's Taylor Green and Sellers, Honora Sellers. The reason why I think the draft community can love Garrett so much is because he plays quarterback. Now, other guys play quarterback, but Garrett actually plays within structure. I know that was brought up quite a bit. It's just the way that we view the quarterback position has changed. Do I think Garrett Nussmeier is better than Lenore Sellers and DJ Lagway and all these other great quarterbacks? I do. I don't think it's massive, but I do think he's better than those guys. But NFL guys that watch from an NFL perspective like to see NFL things. That's what they're looking at. That's what they're looking for. And it's refreshing to see because, you know, they got to break down Jackson Dart. You guys know Lane Kiffin is probably my favorite play caller in the SEC. He schemes guys so wide open. He is so good at that. So good at that. That's why I'm staying away from Jackson Dart as a QB draft prospect. I'm in a pretty big dynasty league. Passed on Jackson Dart recently. It is going to be a wonderful season with Garrett Nussmeier as our quarterback. And, you know, to finish one final thing, there are so many throws that he makes with so much anticipation. And where I would agree with Drew, as far as where Garrett is truly spectacular, is the intermediate throws, especially over the middle. Those throws are so hard. They are so hard. So there you go. Big thanks to each and every one of you. I do have, this ran a little long. I do have another appearance tonight. I'll be on AYS here in just a moment. So you guys can scurry over there. And I will also say, if you want my thoughts on LSU baseball, it's right before the break, a little bit earlier, before the Zion imaging stuff. I think we'll be fine. I am not qualified to give you a full breakdown of West Virginia. It's just not. You're just not going to get that here. That's why I like LSU baseball so much, because I could just enjoy it and watch it as a fan. LSU football, I am a fan, but you know, we're doing breakdowns. So I'm watching all the intricacies. So that's part of why I don't like getting into like the weeds of baseball, and it's also so random. But I'm feeling pretty good about this weekend in Baton Rouge, because Euler had freaking Babe Ruth at number 26, and that freaking Jim Edmonds, Willie Mays reincarnated in center field. I'm so glad those guys are no longer here. Euler, I have a connection to Euler. I have a friend that does all their media stuff. He was on the show last Thursday, and he was the one that was telling us, hey, don't sleep on us. And I know he's supposed to say that, but he was being legit. He was like, hey, I think we're going to slay Goliath. And they nearly did. He called his shot. It was crazy. But I wanted to say all of that because we will be chatting baseball throughout the weekend in our private Discord community. So sign up at the link below. And on Sunday, my Discordians don't know this. My patrons don't know this yet. My first Cade Klubnik breakdown will be live. My first Cade film study will be for our patrons. Sneak peek. Because we're going to be doing a lot of Cade breakdowns. Check it out, patreon.com/LSU football. And congrats, patrons. You're getting a Cade breakdown. It'll be in your inbox on Sunday. I say that, but we'll be chatting about baseball. We got a few baseball experts in the Discord. Jared, I don't think he would call himself an expert, but he knows baseball. But a guy who really, really, really knows this team is Sam. Sam is a baseball expert. And, man, he had a hot take earlier in the year. I flamed him for it about the LSU baseball team. It turned out to be right. Did it not, Sam? It is! Pound out LSU. Boom! Tonight, we're doing burgers. Let's go.